Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1329. Hey, if you want to download this Excel workbook, Excel Magic Trick 1329 Start or the finished file so you can follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, we got a great video here. We have this data set. And check this out. We have a region column with a local number, and we have a column with company and product. And here's what we need. We need the total for each region and each product. Now, really what we would have to do conceptually is we need to clean this column right. So we have just Midwest, just West. And over here, we need to clean this column, get rid of the company name, and have just the product name. Now, our end result is going to be adding with two conditions. So for example, here, we're actually going to need to add from the sales column based on the condition Carlota matching the records from the product column and West from the region column. So for example, this record would be included, meaning that number would be included in our adding calculation because the record contains the product Carlota and the region West. Now, if we actually had the criteria like this already done, the formula is pretty easy, and we'll use the SUMIFS functions. However, if we didn't already have our criteria here, and we needed to get a unique list of criteria from both the region and company column here, there's a few ways we can do it, but probably Power Query's going to be the easiest. All right, now let's see the SUMIFS functions first. Now, actually, before we do our formula and Power Query, I've already converted this data set to a proper Excel table. Now we have our field names at the top and records in rows. I already went up to Insert and clicked on the Table button or used the keyboard Control-T. And then I very carefully went up to Design for Table Tools and named it in Properties. So the name of this table is F Sales. Now look at that. I can already see I made a capitalization error. I'm going to change this and hit Enter. All right, now let's come over here, and we'll use SUMIFS. Now, SUMIFS is perfect for adding when you have two conditions or criteria. There's the sum range. That's the entire column of all the numbers we potentially want to add. So I'm going to click on the top cell, Control-Shift-Down arrow. And now, if I hit F4 to lock it, because we're going to copy this down, that really doesn't do anything because this is an Excel table. And so when you highlight a column, it shows you table formula nomenclature. There's the table name followed by the field name in square brackets. All right, comma. Now the criteria range, I'm going to start with the region column. Now, I'm going to type this table formula nomenclature out. If I type FS, notice it tells me that's the table name from the dropdown, so I can hit Tab. Then when I type an open square bracket, I can use the arrow key to arrow down to the actual field name I want. Tab, and then close square bracket. Notice it turns orange when you have the right syntax, comma. The criteria. Well, guess what? Look at this column. It has region and then dash and number. So if I were to click just on region, it would get a 0 because there are no just plain Wests over here. But notice the pattern in this column. It's always the region followed by a bunch of stuff. So it's got West as the beginning part of the text it's going to search for as criteria. Then I'm going to join it to, using the ampersand, a wildcard that says 0 or more characters. In double quotes, I put the wildcard, asterisk, and then end double quote. Now, what that criteria says is that it will find anything that starts with W-E-S-T. And that's convenient because notice there's a West-74, West-52, and so on, comma. Now we need to look through the product column for our criteria range. Now I'm going to highlight the first cell, Control-Shift-Down arrow, F4 or Control-Backspace to jump back to the active cell. There is the table name, and in square brackets our field name, comma. And now the criteria. I'm going to click on this cell, Bellin. That's a relative cell reference, so when we copy it down, it will move. But we need to look over here and see what the pattern is here. Well, here we want always ends with the actual product name. So the wildcard will come before the product name. Double quotes, asterisks, which means 0 or more characters, and double quote, and join it to our criteria. And that formula will do it. Close parentheses, Control Enter. Double click and send it down. I go to the last cell, F2, just to check the cell references. Everything looks good. Now, let's see how to do this with Power Query. Now, Power Query requires that we have already converted our data set to an Excel table, which we have already done. In 2016, you go to Data, and Get and Transform Group is our Power Query. In Excel 2013 or 10, you have to download it and install it as an add-in, and it will be a separate tab. In any version, the way we get data from an Excel table into the Power Query editor is we click From Table. So you can click that, or you can use the keyboard Alt-A-P-T. And there is our data set. Now, I'm immediately going to come over and drag this over here. I'm going to name this something different because I want the query to have its own name. And not only that, but when I finally get my end report and load it back into Excel, I want the table that is created to have this name. So I'm going to say, I called it something like clean summed to criteria and enter. Now, let's go and click on the date column and right-click remove, because that is not going to be in our final report. Right-click remove. Now, I want to click on the region-local column, and I need to get rid of the last 3 characters from the right. So I'm going to say use split column by number of characters. I'm going to say number of characters 3, and I'm going to say once as far right as possible. Now I click OK. Now I've split it into 2 columns. I do not need this one. Not only that, but notice it actually added an extra step here, change type. It's perfectly all right to leave it in there, but I'm going to click that red X to delete it because we don't need it. Now we don't need this, so I right-click remove. Now I can rename this column. I'm going to double-click and only leave it as region and enter. Now over here, it looks like since we don't have a set number of characters, I'm going to split it by a delimiter, and there's a colon and a space. So come up to split by delimiter. Delimiter just means some character that's in between the 2 pieces of data that you're interested in. I'm going to come down to select or enter a delimiter, and check this out. Custom, we can actually add 2 characters as a delimiter. And as I look up here, it's a colon and then a space, colon, space. At each occurrence of delimiter is fine because we only have 1. Click OK. Now, it split our 2 columns. And notice on this new column right here, it already has the icon, which means it has applied a data type. And if we look over here to our applied steps, sure enough, there's our change type. Now, it's perfectly all right to leave it there, but I'm going to click the red X to delete it because we don't really need it as a step there. Now we have our product. We don't need company. Right-click remove. Now I can come over to product, double-click the field name, and I'm going to call this product, and enter. Now what do we need? We need our adding on this column based on 2 conditions. I'm going to select region column, then hold Shift or Control, and select product. Now, what we need from these 2 columns is a unique list of records. So, for example, I need Midwest Carlota, Midwest Quad, and a Midwest Bellum. That's it for Midwest. Then I need the aggregate calculation sum for each one of those sets of criteria. Well, remember, over in Excel, we used SUMIFS. Well, over here in Power Query or databases or SQL, we use something called group by. Now, group by is awesome. If I select these 2 columns, it'll automatically create a unique list of records. And then from that, it will add based on this sales column. So I've selected the 2 columns. I'm going to click group by. And look at that. It automatically lists the 2 columns because we've selected them over here. Now I come down to the new column name for our aggregate calculation, and I'm going to call it total sales. Tab. I can either select the drop down, or I can down arrow and select the sum function. That will be our operation. Tab, tab. The column we want to add, that's going to be sales. I can use my mouse or I can down arrow and tab. Now what group by did is it created a unique list of records from these two columns, and then it's going to make an aggregate calculation. When I click OK, that is amazing. There's our unique list of records and our aggregate calculation adding. Now I definitely want to sort, so I'm going to come up to region and select descending Z to A. Then over to product, I want A to Z or ascending. And there's our final report. Now we can come up to close and load. Close and load to. I definitely want it as a table, and I want to load it to this existing sheet. I can type the reference there or click the collapse button. Select whichever cell. I selected F14. Click OK. Click Load. And there is our final report, either with Power Query or with a formula. Now, since this is an Excel table and we get some more records later, let's see what happens to both of these outputs when we highlight and copy these records. So I'm going to highlight Control-C and scroll over, and I want to go to the bottom of our Excel table. So I'm going to select a cell, Control down arrow, and then Control-V to paste. There are our new records incorporated into the table. I'm going to use Control-Home to jump to cell A1. And we want to notice something here. Here's East Carlota, and our formula has instantly updated. But look down here. Our Power Query did not update. No problem. Right-click anywhere in the table and refresh. And instantly it updates. All right, that's pretty amazing. We use Power Query to actually clean and transform, and then use group by to create our adding with two conditions. And up here we use SUMIFS, table formula nomenclature, and criteria with wildcards. And we saw that the formulas update instantly. Power Query takes a simple refresh. All right, we'll see you next trick.